Welcome to CivilNet. Today our guest is Dr. Mustafa Aydin, Professor of International Relations at Kadir Has University in Istanbul. He's here in Yerevan to participate in a conference organized by the Caucasus Institute entitled Gathering Storm, Regional Security of the South Caucasus in the Context of the Crisis of the Global Order. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Well, it's a very ominous title, but
it is.
Perhaps an appropriate one based on everything that's been going on in just even the past 2 months. So there's been significant changes unfolding in the global and regional levels. There's a lot of uncertainty with Russia and Ukraine on one hand, and then the conflicts in the Middle East on the other. And Turkey is right in the middle geographically of all of that. And it's been maybe playing a bigger role as well. So what is that role and what does it make of these developments?
Well, I think Turkey has almost always been in the middle of all this chaotic region. We don't need to go too much back in the history, but even since the end of the Cold War, if you just think about how many conflicts and the wars you remember around the world, and I would guarantee 70+% of them were around Turkey. There was one calculation at one point in NATO that there was 16 wars or conflicts that NATO was interested, and 13 of them were around Turkey and bordering Turkey. So it's always a very volatile region. Middle East, Balkans used to be like that, and the Black Sea and the Caucasus, of course. Being there, it's this kind of it demands a kind of an attitude where you prioritize security, geopolitics, and strategy, which sometimes affects Turkish domestic politics, of course, and its foreign policy. When you prioritize security concerns, then other interests like economic cooperation or democratization in domestic politics, or etc., they kind of relegated to lesser places. That's how it affects Turkey directly. Secondly, of course, it creates a sense of urgency in the country to be able to defend itself if any of these conflicts spill over into Turkey. There has always been this kind of danger, not only because Turkey is interested in these conflicts, which Turkey is, but also some of the people involved in these conflicts had continuous populations inside Turkey also. Like, when there is a conflict in Syria, there are Kurds and Turkomans on both sides, and Arabs also on both sides of the border. The similar things happens in Iraq. And if it's a conflict in the Caucasus between Azerbaijan and Armenia, then it becomes kind of a Turkic solidarity issue. So these are kind of worry points for Turkey. But at the same time, it's not all doom and gloom. At the same time, this kind of a geographic position allows Turkey to be more active, more influential, and more important in a sense within its neighborhood. It allows Turkey to be able to punch above its weight, so to speak.
And where you talk about influence in the neighborhood, and our neighborhood here in the South Caucasus might be another one where it's looking to assert itself. But that role for a long time as top dog in the neighborhood belonged to Russia. And Turkey and Russia have both a mutually beneficial relationship, but also a geopolitical rivalry. So there's a lot of mixed, we never quite know what's going on between the two of them, I feel like. So how might this play out, especially if Ukraine war recedes as a big preoccupation for Russia, and perhaps Russia returns to this area as well?
Well, I call Turkish-Russian relations as competitive cooperation. So we compete everywhere, almost everywhere, outside our countries. Bilateral relations, moves quite well nowadays. In last, I would say, 15 years at least. Economy cooperation is booming, trade, energy, and etc. And that there seems to be a common understanding regarding the international affairs as well, in general, global affairs in general. However, whenever we are concentrated in any one of the geographies that two countries are interested. Be it in Syria, Libya, or Caucasus, or Ukraine, we disagree. So this is a kind of a puzzle, a nice puzzle to try to understand, etc. Looking into focusing on the Caucasus, of course, there has been competition since the Soviet Union collapse. There is no denying that, but two countries also recognize and understand, I believe, that competition harms their interest as well. Because if competition passes to certain level or certain border, then it starts to benefiting third countries, other countries that also have an interest in the Caucasus. So if Turkey and Russia competes deadly, competes to the end, like we did in the 1990s, then non-regional countries, European countries, United States or Iran or maybe now China, becomes more influential and takes the prizes from the region. And prizes, when I say prizes, it's mostly economic benefits and cooperation and maybe a little bit political influence also. So as a result, I think Turkey is also looking apprehensively what would happen post-Ukraine war Caucasus. Because we all know Russia has lost its focus in the Caucasus, had to concentrate on Ukraine. But a Russia that might consider itself as a victorious in Ukraine, which is different than being victorious reality, because Russia is not able to win the war in Ukraine. But if it's draw, if it's accepted by as it is, the ground, then Russia would be considered itself as a victorious. That Russia might wish to be more influential in its neighborhood. It includes the Black Sea, Caucasus, Baltics, possibly maybe Central Asia even. But focusing on the Caucasus, there is already indications that all three countries are watching very carefully. Mm-hmm. There is already a movement in Georgia being closer to Russia or work with Russia. Not in the societal level maybe, but in the government level, it's very clear already. Azerbaijan has always had this idea of balanced foreign policy, meaning that balancing different interests, and they are kind of distancing themselves from Europe for whatever reason, but also coming closer slowly to Russia. Maybe the odd man out here is Armenia, which is moving on the other side. But again, if Russia...
But even Pashinyan said that he's going to be going to the Victory May 9th celebrations, which he didn't in the past few years, and that might be the calculus at play there.
It shows the indication that even this government here is looking to what's next. Mm-hmm. And everybody understands if Russia is focused and concentrated in the Caucasus, it will have more influence. This would create a little bit problem for Turkey. So long this kind of an influence doesn't interfere with Turkey's economic trade relationship, and it doesn't diminishes Turkey's good neighborly relations with these countries, it's not a problem. So long Russia doesn't want to bring peacekeeping forces or whatever they call them into this neighborhood, it doesn't bother Turkey. But if they start to bringing soldiers again, the former bases or etc., that becomes a problematic, because then that becomes a security threat. I think that's how we are looking from Turkey at the moment, at least.
Now, if it wanted to increase its influence in the South Caucasus region, a big thing it could do is open the border with Armenia. Sure. And we are on almost 3 years since they announced that, in fact, it would. And as someone with a third-party passport that would be allowed to cross over, I was really looking forward to that. But it has still not come to pass. Armenia has the station ready right on the border to open at any time. We saw it open one time during the tragic earthquake. But overall, it seems like more and more preconditions get piled on by Azerbaijan, and Turkey goes along with it. What are we seeing here?
you are seeing exactly what you are seeing. It seems that the government in Turkey has totally accepted this perception or this view that unless Azerbaijan is satisfied with its relations with Armenia, Turkey is not going to move forward with its normalization with Armenia. This is debatable inside Turkey also. Strategically, whether it's a good decision or not decision, we can talk about it. But this is the political reality governing the issue. And I don't see too much of a push from Turkey. I haven't seen any push or any talk really with Azerbaijanis about moving on this issue. And I think it looks like there is now currently one condition from Azerbaijan. It's change of Armenian constitution.
So there's a lot more that appear to be in reserve that it keeps referencing, and that might, I don't know. I mean, there's no trust in this process, so that's the problem. We don't know because we didn't hear about constitution until about the past year or so, and so these things have a way of finding their way into.
Yeah, I think they've been talking about it for, I don't know, 3-4 years now. I mean, at least I heard about it. But we were at least watching from outside. We were hopeful that two countries announced that finally they agreed on the peace deal. What's left is signing, and Azerbaijan seems to have one condition. Whether that condition is fair or not is beyond debate. This is the reality on the ground, and it seems Turkey is not going to move ahead. There is some talk in Turkey, of course, in academia, in think tank society, that now the agreement is ready. Turkey might ask gently Azerbaijan to move forward. But we don't know that yet because there is no official government announcement about this. I haven't heard any press statements or anything, except that we support the peace process, and if they sign the deal, and then we open the border, and that's it.
I think a lot of Armenians, maybe others too, are wondering though. Turkey is a huge, powerful country, and Azerbaijan, while it certainly has its influence, it is not in the same category. And so why is it that Turkey can't say, for example, all right, we had said Armenia must give up this territory, they must do this, they must do that. Everything that we said as prerequisites to open the border have been accomplished. And Azerbaijan, you have even said that you are at the point of an agreement of text. Let's get on with it. Or what, are they afraid of some sort of backlash in the society, or what is it?
I think it's a culmination of several factors. First of all, Turkish-Azerbaijani relations are strategic. The level of cooperation, level of integration is quite high. And that makes Azerbaijan and Azerbaijani government too valuable to Turkey or Turkish government to just ignore them. We have seen this problem back in 1999 when Armenia and Turkey was moving towards normalization with the protocols and everything. Then Azerbaijan reacted, and it created a backlash in Turkey and etc. That's one reason. I mean, there is huge economic cooperation, investments, Azerbaijani investments in Turkey. There is military cooperation, security cooperation. So it's strategically it's very important to just ignore it. The second aspect is, I think, the popular approach to the issue. There is what I would call a big Azerbaijani popular support in Turkey. Whatever reason, it's diverse reasons. It's not simply because they are Turkic and we are Turkic, but it goes beyond that. But the population in general supports Azerbaijan no matter what. This creates a kind of a political weight in Turkey, because we have seen the effect of this in 1999. Government needed to react because of this. And then there is obviously affinity and close cooperation between presidents of Azerbaijan and Turkey. And they seem to understand each other, they seem to like to each other, and they seem to have a common understanding to move together. This kind of myriad different argumentations create a place where a puzzle. It's difficult to understand how, especially looking from outside, how a big country is conditioned by a smaller country, but that has become reality. We all try to understand and come up with these explanations, but the basic bottom is that Erdogan promised in Azerbaijani parliament that he's not going to open the border unless Azerbaijan signs the peace deal. This was something, a move previously Turkish government didn't have, because previously our official line was that the occupied territories, if they are liberated or given up, then Turkey would open the border. So this was a new move. It was made politically personal move. So it would be very difficult for the same president to move back from that promise made in the Azerbaijani parliament. That also makes it political, personal political.
That makes sense. And now the other side of all of this, it's a lot about, we have the connection of Azerbaijan and Turkey, and then we have, there's a great deal of mistrusts amongst Armenians. Sure. I see this whenever Pashinyan, the prime minister, makes some sort of entree towards Turkey, you get lots of calls of traitor, and there's just a great degree of mistrust. And I mean, like you even said, Turkey has its own worries in its region of its own security. And so imagine if a big army like Turkey has insecurities, Armenia has even more. Of course. And then there are many historical roots. Many of us, and me included, we had ancestors that lived in Turkey for a very, very long time, Ottoman era, and no longer part of it. And that's created this rupture that has never been connected, nor is there much attempt, I think, at connecting it. Discussions like these are important because we really don't get the view from Turkey all that much over here. But do you think there are any willingness to take some steps towards Armenians? It's hard to expect Armenia to do any more than it already has at this point. Is there anything, or is that just, again, it's all hostage to the Azerbaijan situation?
Well, I mean, when you started your question, you actually imply that Armenia is kind of one of the issues that Turkey has to deal with. And in that sense, Armenia is, fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on where you are looking from, is out of Turkey's gaze at the moment. Let me put it that way. Because so many things are happening, so many things are changing globally and regionally, which affects the global picture also. Turkish attention is diverted. Caucasus, and especially after the war, the last war over Nagorno-Karabakh, and when these territories were recovered by Azerbaijan, for Turkey, this Caucasus put on the back burner. It's not anymore a priority. It's not even, I think, on the first page of priority list of the foreign ministry. There are so many more issues that are on the more impressive issues. Like the future of Syria is kind of a survival issue for Turkey, because it depends. What happens in Syria directly affects Turkish domestic politics because of the Kurdish connection. What happens in Syria affects directly Turkish security, because if it's a failed state and if it's again plunged into this civil war, then we have to be there, and next 10 years another problem. So that's huge there. Then there is the Ukraine war, and the Black Sea is so important because it affects the militarization of the Black Sea, affects the balances there. Russia is there, Turkey's historical rival and everything. So that's a huge thing for Turkey. We have to keep Ukraine independent and as big as possible so that we can balance Russia some in the Black Sea. Then we have relations with Greece and Cyprus. which is again about the territorial integrities, about the sovereignty, always more and more important issues. And of course now everybody looking United States, what Trump wants from anybody. So he hasn't spoken of any of the issues yet that relates to Turkey, which is something good if he doesn't.
That's true.
But nevertheless, he will come back and talk about Syria and maybe Cyprus, maybe Iraq, and etc. So Turkey is kind of preparing that. And domestically, you follow Turkey, of course. There are so many things are going on in domestic politics.
The past few days especially.
Well, I mean, not only that, we have been, kind of a roller coaster with the, kind of Kurdish issue and new opening, which is, an issue of 50 plus years. It's difficult, this kind. So when you are focusing on this kind of existential issues, then opening the border with a small Caucasian country kind of lost its significance. In that sense, it's not a strategic anymore. It's not on the strategic list. If it happens, good, it happens. If it doesn't happen, well, we'll wait. That kind of an attitude sets in, unfortunately.
I guess the one thing that could put it back on the radar a bit, we have every day coming from Azerbaijan, these claims Armenia is shelling us over and over and over, Armenia denying, and people are even having alleged there are all over social media of convoys of Azerbaijani tanks and things going towards the border. Now, we don't know what to make of any of that, but is that even on Turkey's radar, or not really any expectation that there's going to be another war all of a sudden?
I mean, maybe it's on the radar of government or military or intelligence or foreign ministry, but I don't know it because it's not on the radar of the press or anything in public. Unless you are, of course, monitoring the Azerbaijani and Armenian news, you don't know about these things. It doesn't get reported in Turkey. So in that sense, it's not in the radar. But let me tell you here that it's not only Turkey. Right? The Caucasus is put in the back burner of everybody now. It's relegated to the second, third tier of interest. The United States doesn't really have a policy now for the future of the Caucasus. The European Union, it's looking inward and opening their heart and searching souls and everything. So it's not a surprise that Turkey is not that much involved also in the Caucasus. One thing that might make Turkey more interested in the Caucasus, of course, if there is a war, everybody has to be interested, which nobody wants, but it's unfortunate kind of example. But if Russia is back with a more influence, more pressure on the regional countries, that would make Turkey more interested in the Caucasus. Timing might be not very good at that time. I mean, it might be too late to be interested in the Caucasus, but that kind of jolting effect, Turkey might need to be more, turning its gaze to the Caucasus, because we are looking too much on the Middle East, on the Caucasus and the Mediterranean at the moment, not the Caucasus.
I'll close on one little thing that happened in the past week. We had, perhaps, I don't know, unprecedented, some have said, a group of Turkish journalists met with the prime minister. They've had other trips here, but a one-on-one with him was pretty unique, and there were a lot of stories that were in the Turkish press. How do you assess that? Do you think it, did it get through to the mainstream, or is more of just a niche thing for people that watch, these types of things?
I think it has to happen more frequently. I mean, this is not the first time. I remember even in 1990s there were Turkish journalists coming, and more so the Armenian journalists also coming to Turkey. So I think this has to happen more and more. There was news. I mean, everybody who came here, I think, wrote some piece about it, and a couple of them made more splash than the others. It doesn't generate, obviously, as I said, the scene is too crowded.
Yeah, there's way more going on than.
I mean, I wrote a piece about Black Sea and European Union and Turkey. It's published on Monday. We couldn't announce it because the domestic interest is totally out of. Nobody would care if I announced that I published this paper. At this analysis at the moment. So journalists writing about this, it's all about timing. if you have a huge domestic political turmoil, nobody will care about a small piece on any newspaper or online newspaper mostly. But these kind of things should continue to happen in order to create better understanding of what the current Armenian political classes wants from this relationship. And then also Armenians to understand what really Turkey wants and does things. Because usually I travel a lot with, in the neighborhood, in the Caucasus, but in other neighborhoods of Turkey. And usually we have this myths, stories from history, and then they stuck, right? We create these images about each other and they stuck. And it's very difficult to change them. The only way to change them is to have much more contact, talks, and kind of debunking all these myths. Because if I don't come here to tell the story of Turkey or from Turkish perspective, somebody else would do this from a different perspective, from a different interest, right? So that's why I think this was a good initiative. I don't know whether the invitation came from Armenian side or the journalists wanted to come here, but nevertheless, whoever did it, it was a good idea. Timing was a little bit off because of the domestic developments in Turkey, but I hope it will continue because then it might create some sort of an interest, at least part of the society segment who are interested in this kind of issues.
Actually, a unique thing that all over social media, YouTube, they've got a lot of videos. It's become like a whole trend or theme in Turkey to have these Turkish visitors to Armenia and just do these vlogs on the street.
I saw some of them.
Yeah,
yes.
Some of them are kind of, some of them kind of portrayed negatively, but many of them are like, oh, I'm surprised, things actually did go quite well here and people were friendly and I've met Turkish people here.
Of course.
They've always had good experiences.
This is something new, right? I remember first time when I came to Armenia, it was difficult. Years ago, the war continuing and everything. But people worry about it. I come here, people who likes me or who loves me are worried.
They're going to hurt you.
I mean, you never know, right? And I heard, I have so many Armenian friends coming to Turkey for the first time. They were also worried because they didn't know. Right? If something happens to me or would it happen, etc. So this kind of visits opens up the societies also to the other side. And Armenia has never been on tourist destination for Turks. But in recent years, most of the Turks normally don't go abroad for a holiday. But because of the economic problems in last few years in Turkey, now more and more Turks are going abroad. Okay, mostly to Greece because it's Mediterranean and sea, but now I see many Turks are going to Georgia and Azerbaijan for tourism purposes, which is more important than I'm coming here as an expert of Caucasus. Right? So Armenia, in that sense, might be next. And this kind of human-to-human contact has an impact because I'm also involved quite a lot with Greek-Turkish relations, and we are looking on this kind of things. And there, human-to-human contact, the tourists, are more important than business contacts or even the governmental contacts. So I think this is good that ordinary people goes to each other and they shot this video saying that everything is normal here. Let's explore.
That's exactly it. I think wherever someone lands on the political spectrum, there is no reason to oppose just a better understanding of who your neighbors are. So
and sometimes, the things that we experts, of course, we follow, we travel these regions and we tell our perspectives, but it's too kind of in a pedestal. The ordinary citizens and people sometimes don't even trust or believe what we say because, well, you are expert, you are working on it, but you don't know the reality. The reality is, so it's good that they themselves personally experience and see it.
You've got to see it to believe it, and I've seen it as well with Turkish people visiting that have only had really positive experiences, and as was this interview. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciated it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me here.
And thank you for joining CivilNet.